Ferrari's 2025 so far has been bitterly disappointing. To have any chance of salvaging something from what's becoming, by its standards, a terrible season, it needs a big reset, and soon. There are reasons to hope for an upturn in fortunes, which we'll get into shortly, but first, the big question is, why has it gone so wrong? After all, Ferrari ended last year on a positive trajectory. Despite losing out on the Constructors' Championship to McLaren by just 15 points, it was the top scoring team after the August break. The Ferrari SF-25 was supposed to be the car that built on the promise of last year, and Ferrari didn't stand still given there were concerns that it reached the limit of development potential of its existing car concept. While still an evolution of the 2024 car in terms of its philosophy, team principal Fred Vasseur described the 2025 design as more than 99% new. The most visually obvious change was the switch to pull rod front suspension, making Ferrari a latecomer to the prevailing trend for this configuration at the front. The wheelbase of the car was also lengthened, which was all part of, as technical director Loic Serra explained, finding space to exploit aerodynamically. The new Ferrari is an improvement in terms of performance, or at least it is when compared with the pace of the car at the same tracks early last season, but it's clearly not a big enough step forward. Others have made bigger gains, and, on average, the Ferrari has been only the fourth fastest car. What's more, it was even challenged by Williams in Miami, with Alex Albon finishing ahead of both Ferraris in the Grand Prix. Ferrari's race performance has been erratic. There have been good moments, notably Lewis Hamilton's sprint successes with victory in China and third in Miami, and Charles Leclerc's third place in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix after showing strong race pace, but for the most part, the races have been disappointing. The double exclusion in China, Charles Leclerc from 5th place for being underweight and Lewis Hamilton from 6th for excessive plank wear, was the low point in terms of results. But the performance in Miami recently was no less dispiriting and, as Leclerc explained, highlighted the car's weaknesses. In qualifying, Leclerc was over half a second off the pace. A significant proportion of that time loss was in the slowest corners, in particular the turn 11 to 16 section, where he shipped 4/10 to Max Verstappen's pole position time. Leclerc finished 7th in the race, a massive 57 seconds behind winner Oscar Piastri, and to make matters worse, there was also a very public spat over team orders. Far from getting better, Miami indicated that Ferrari's season is getting worse. So what's the root cause of Ferrari's lack of performance? Well, we've already referenced one, which is the poor low-speed corner performance. The car isn't the strongest traction-wise, at times has been prone to front brake lockups and understeer in such corners. This suggests that a key strength of previous seasons, the mechanical grip of the car, is no longer there. That's bad news for Leclerc's hopes of a second win on the streets of Monaco later this month. It would be easy to point to the switch to pull rod front suspension for this, and potentially that has played a part. After all, making such a significant change for the final year of a rule cycle is a risk, and Ferrari's technical partner Haas opted not to take the 2025 specification front suspension. Haas team principal Ao Komatsu argued that given the switch to pull rod is about aerodynamic gains, that requires an accompanying re-optimization of the whole car's aero design. As he put it, you have to take a hit first, then you recover. Ferrari has certainly taken a hit, but its recovery has been slow, and while the suspension is part of the problem, likely down less to the geometry and more to the internal components and the struggle to hold the car in the required narrow ride height window, there are also aerodynamic difficulties. The problem Ferrari had with skid wear appears to have led to needing to consistently run a little higher at the rear than intended. The key to extracting performance from these cars is to run as low as possible. Even a rise of say 1mm or less saps downforce. The aero characteristics and the mechanical characteristics are interlinked. Early in the season, the car had an understeer problem in the faster corners that was solved by accepting an increase in rear instability at corner entry. This is the result of what Leclerc has called extreme setup experiments that started in Japan. It's about making the best of it for Ferrari. After all, while that's the best compromise setup for now, the instability is one of the problems causing difficulty for Hamilton. All of these problems are interlinked and ultimately indicate that the car is not running with the setup it was conceived to in terms of ride height. Doing so means that it's at risk of excess plank wear owing to bottoming out. The strengths of last year's car relative to the opposition have been lost, and the weaknesses, for example the difficulty extracting single lap pace in qualifying, have been retained. The one positive that has occasionally manifested itself, for example in Jeddah, is that there are times when the car looks after its rear tyres well over a race stint, but that's not always a strength that's there. Right from the start of the season, the Ferrari has looked like a capricious and inconsistent car on track. The sweet spot is almost impossible to find, and it's clear that the bold step to make changes this year has backfired.
While we're on the topic of racing, F1 Clash is back with its 6th and most action-packed season yet. With nearly 40 million players over the last 5 years, this free-to-play mobile game brings the intensity of Formula 1 straight to your pocket. You'll build your own team, develop winning strategies, and race in real-time head-to-head duels, all set against the backdrop of the official F1 calendar. It's fast-paced, strategic, and incredibly fun, whether you're a casual gamer or a die-hard F1 fan. Season 6 brings updated 2025 team liveries, driver stats, rosters, and a brand new DRS feature, giving you more control over your race strategy. Plus, you can unlock and race with F1 legends like Jenson Button, Damon Hill, Mark Webber, and Gilles Villeneuve, with even more legends joining throughout the season. Download F1 Clash now for free on iOS and Android and experience the thrill for yourself. Just hit the link in the description.
Vasseur has, in public at least, accentuated the positive. He's stressed how narrow the gap is and how big a swing a couple of tenths can make in qualifying. He's also consistently talked up the potential of the car. Indeed, in Miami, he put the struggles down to not extracting the potential of the tyres. He's right that getting the most out of the tricky Pirelli rubber is vitally important, and that was a struggle on race day in Miami. There is likely further performance there for everybody to unlock to a greater or lesser extent. However, Leclerc was very frank about how close Ferrari is to extracting all of the potential from its current car after qualifying in Miami. And there, it's all about increasing the potential of the car. That means Ferrari needs upgrades, and fast. And as Vasseur has confirmed, there will be some small upgrades across the upcoming Imola and Monaco weekends. But it will be the race after that, in Spain, that could be the key to whether Ferrari can turn its season around. The final race of the upcoming triple header in Spain is one where the majority of teams will bring changes to their front wings. This is because the technical directive reducing the permitted flexibility kicks in for that race. Under F1's current front wing load test, no more than 15mm of flexing is allowed. This clarification will reduce that allowance to 10mm. The TD also reduces the flexibility of what are called fish plates. These are the small connecting pieces of bodywork. Vasseur describes the change of front wings in Barcelona as perhaps a reset of performance for all teams. While that's possibly a case of hope over expectation, there are reasons to suppose it could help Ferrari. The problem it had in the high-speed corners, as well as the struggle for front-end grip in the slower stuff, is indicative of a struggle to produce a good balance across a wide range of corner speeds. The flexible front wing is a key tool for achieving that, and it may be an area where Ferrari is behind, despite making gains on that score in the closing stages of last season. However, it would be a mistake to assume that this could cure all Ferrari's ills. The mechanical struggles will remain, and there are rumours in Italy of modifications to the rear suspension coming later in the season. Whether these will be to the geometry or to the internals is for now unclear. Unfortunately for Ferrari's hopes of challenging for the championship, it's all likely to be too little too late, given it's already 152 points down in the Constructors' title race, with Leclerc already 78 points off the pace in the Drivers'. The inevitable question that has to be asked, given 2025 has likely already got away from Ferrari in terms of achieving its objectives of fighting for titles, is whether it's time for the team to switch its focus fully to 2026. It's important to remember that Ferrari has put a significant amount of effort into 2026 development from the start of the year, when the ban on aerodynamic testing of next year's car was lifted. Vasseur made that clear at the end of last year, meaning that it isn't really an option to write off this year and focus on next year, because 26 development was always a priority anyway. However, this does appear to have backed Ferrari into a corner in terms of the scale of the changes it made with its 2025 car and the struggle to make the best of that. Therefore, the question now has to be whether Ferrari chooses to ease up on 26 development to try and make more of its current car. The answer to that surely has to be no. The development rate of an immature car under new rules is steep, whereas for the current car it is very shallow. So any work that's diverted from the 26 car onto the current one is extremely costly. Chances are that decision has already been made. Vasseur said in April that the final call would be made on how to split resources after the first 5 races, and Miami was race 6. Admittedly, at the same time, he also indicated there was still room for manoeuvre. However, with where Ferrari is now, it's very difficult to imagine it can turn around its season from here. While last year it had assistance from Red Bull's struggles after early dominance, it's unrealistic to expect the same thing to happen to McLaren this year. However, that doesn't mean Ferrari can simply turn off work on 2025. What's now critical for the team is that it understands what's gone wrong with this car and ensures that any problems are not replicated next year. Because while the new rules mean a very different car for 2026, the tools and knowledge that have fallen short for Ferrari this year are the same ones being used to design and develop next year's car. That's why the priority now for Ferrari is understanding exactly why it has fallen short so far in 2025.
A car concept that could only last 1 year by regulation, and a very bold choice to make that change. And how bold that change is, well, you really get to see that when you take a closer look at this year's Ferrari. And the most obvious change is the front suspension, switching from a push rod front suspension system to a pull rod front suspension system is a fairly fundamental change, and one you normally wouldn't do in the final year of a set of technical regulations. But that's exactly what Ferrari have done, and that comes with a whole load of risk. Making the switch, we've talked about it a little bit before, lowers a lot of the mechanical components in the steering system and in the suspension system, lower in the chassis. However, it also comes with serviceability problems. You can see the Ferrari mechanics working around here, and it's a bit harder to make adjustments to the suspension if it's all very deep in the monocoque. It also has some aerodynamic benefits depending on who you listen to in the sport, but changing from a push rod to a pull rod is a very, very big change. But there are other big fundamental changes on the layout of this Ferrari. But looking at the front suspension that Ferrari used last year, we just have to take a look further down the pit lane at Haas. And here we see last year's Ferrari front suspension installed on this year's Haas, because they share so many components. It's a really good comparison between the two cars. And there you can see the Ferrari layout employed very cleanly by the American team. But when you compare back to the Ferrari, you can see just how different that front end is. But the differences didn't stop there. The car was packed with lots of interesting aerodynamic details. Ferrari really had worked very hard on this year's car, and that work is continuing, and we're going to come to that shortly. But have a look here. I love this little detail of the mirror housing on the car, different for this year than to last year. And you can see that little winglet element just on the inner face of the rear view mirror. Now, Ferrari were the first team to really start experimenting with mirror housings and making them drag reducing, relating back to work done by the University of Miami some years ago. And Ferrari really pushed the regulations, the wording of the regulations, absolutely to the limit, and continue to do so. But it's influenced all of the other mirror designs up and down the pit lane, and this is Ferrari's latest iteration of using the rear view mirrors as an aerodynamic element. Every team is doing it, but this is Ferrari's interpretation. They seem to like it. There are some other little details as well, which I absolutely love on this car. When you look from a wider angle, you start to see lots and lots of little details. It's, I think, just really open it up for me. You've got these little details. A lot of teams have got these now, just on the inner support of the rear view mirrors. Then you've got slightly modified versions of these aerodynamic elements alongside the halo. So far, no move towards Aston Martin style cooling ducts underneath this support section, but will they go that route in future? We'll have to wait and see. The roll hoop, pretty similar in concept to last season's car. No real reason to change that, even with a major change of car concept. However, working through the car, it does look like with the new car concept that Ferrari are using, they, like a number of other teams, including Mercedes, have taken some serious inspiration from Red Bull Racing. With this tight lower section, well, Ferrari always had that vertical slit on the lower part of the side pod duct, but previously it was separated from the main duct, but it's all integrated into one on this year's car. And just visible in this shot are some of the louvered cooling elements just ahead of the radiator, and they split up the cooling channel under the side pod in a lot of really interesting ways that they don't like us to take a close look at. And well, we'll do that later in the season. But when you look at the car from the side, you can start to see some of the other elements that they've been playing around with. You can see underneath the rear view mirror, taken inspiration perhaps from the 2022 Mercedes, with that large panel extending out ahead of the leading edge of the side pod. Not quite zero pods, but clearly the design inspiration coming from the 2022 Mercedes. You've also got these lovely little aerodynamic flick-ups on the end of that. I don't know if you can call it a side pod wing because it doesn't have a wing section, but it's quite an interesting piece of flow conditioning or aerodynamic wizardry, if you like. You can't really tell what all these parts do without sticking the car in the wind tunnel. and don't listen to anybody else who says different. But there are a lot of other changes going on. The cooling package on the car is constantly changing. Have a look at the cooling louvres on the rear bodywork here. This is the beginning of the season. Couple of slots there, couple of gashes, if you like, on the side. Then today in Bahrain, they've opened it up much more, and you can see 4 or 5 segments on the side. However, as the season has progressed, we've seen Ferrari playing with all sorts of different arrangements. We've touched on this before, with asymmetric arrangements, opening it up on one side, keeping it quite tight for aerodynamic reasons on the other, different components in the side pod being cooled differently. And then you can see it again, they're changing it to 2 tight versions. This was again earlier in the season, 2 tight little coolers. I think that's in the last day of pre-season testing, again in Bahrain. So quite an interesting comparison between a high temperature Bahrain this weekend and a low temperature Bahrain in testing. And temperature is a big factor. So while Ferrari's results on track haven't necessarily been the best, yeah, there was a good result for Lewis Hamilton in the sprint in China. He was later disqualified from the main Grand Prix for excessive wear to the underfloor plank. Here you can see in free practice 1 here in Bahrain, the mechanics changing the plank on the other team car. That's just this section. And what's interesting about this bit of footage is you could just see there how the plank is separated into different segments. So you have the forward segment that you can see just here in the mechanic's hands, but then you can also see the middle segment here. There's also a rear segment to this plank, and it was the rear segment that was found to be excessively worn on Lewis Hamilton's car. And that's really odd, because normally the cars wear this front segment much harder than the rear segment, and that has sparked quite a few rumours for Ferrari. Some people are saying, and they've been saying all season long, that one of the big issues with the Ferrari is that its new gearbox that they started the season with isn't stiff enough. The casing of the gearbox is flexing somehow and isn't giving the rigidity at the rear of the car that the car really needs to react. I'm not sure I really subscribe to that theory. There's various simulation tools Ferrari will have had long before they sort of cast any metal parts or manufactured any carbon fibre parts to manufacture that gearbox casing that would have prevented that. So that seems a little bit unlikely. The other theory I've heard is also that the rear suspension system lacks quite a lot of stiffness. Again, not convinced by that. Haven't seen anything that confirms that. The team has kind of quietly said that's not really the case, and I think really that's just a little bit of fantasy and myth making by some people in the paddock who don't quite know what's really the issue is with Ferrari. One issue that we do know though that does relate to this section of the car is Ferrari cannot run the floor, or could not run the floor, as low to the ground as they really wanted to. And that has been confirmed by the drivers on more than one occasion. Now, these changes to the floor meant the car had to sit slightly higher at the rear, and there are some people who suggest that Ferrari's rear end sits slightly higher to the surface of the racetrack, a higher rear ride height than a number of other teams. And perhaps to address this, at least in part, for the Bahrain Grand Prix, Ferrari has introduced a completely new floor to the car. And we can take a look at that floor just here, because some of the details are quite apparent. The real secret bits underneath the center of the floor we're probably not going to be able to show you. However, some of the more evident bits on the outer edges of the floor we can show you. So you can see actually quite clearly here the new panel leading edge of the floor where you've got this sponsors logo. You can actually see the different color material where they've grafted that onto existing components. But what I can say is there are changes along this section of the floor. The shape has been revised ever so slightly, and this stepped element along the floor edge, that's all new as well. Similar in concept to the old floor, but a different shape, and different shapes are all that matter. You can also see that there's some change being done around this central element of the leading edge of the floor as well. So a bit of work going on there. That absolutely tells you there's more stuff, quite exciting stuff that's going on underneath the floor, but it doesn't stop there. As you move further rearward along the floor, this is the new specification used by Lewis Hamilton in free practice 1. His temporary teammate for free practice 1 used the old floor, which we're going to take a look at in a minute, but Hamilton had this for exclusive use initially, and then Ferrari swapped the floors, then both cars were running the same specification. Charles Leclerc will have that new spec floor for the rest of the weekend as well. When you look further back along the side of the floor as well, you can see more changes. I like to call this section of the floor the viaduct wing, because it looks a bit like some railway architecture on some cars, but I think the FIA have referred to it as a floor edge wing. It's not a wing, so I don't think that's a correct title. However, look at these sections along the edge, lateral protrusions that sort of stick out. Don't know what you'd call those, but it's got 3 of these sculpting elements along the side, and they're very beautifully detailed. In fact, I think we should take a closer look at this central one, for example, and you can just see it's not just a simple bit that sticks out that's a straight panel. It's very curved, very sculpted. A lot of work in the wind tunnel, a lot of work in CFD, and you think you're making that at 60% scale for the wind tunnel? That's going to be some really fine, real craftsmanship going on in developing these cars. But when you compare this shape along the floor edge wing, as the FIA refer to it, you can see 3 sections here. Compare it to the old specification car that made a brief appearance in free practice 1 on the other Ferrari, and you can see this section of the car much shorter to start with, and only 2 protruding elements. Again, a strong indication that there's more going on underneath the car. But for me, the really exciting thing was actually further back. Yes, the floor is likely to make a big difference and allow Ferrari perhaps to run a slightly lower ride height, or perhaps this floor is better at running at the ride height that they've been given with this setup. But for me, the really exciting thing, and only just because it's a bit different to everybody else and what they're using, can be seen just down here, poking out just alongside the exhaust. It's a little winglet that's attached to the what some teams call the Y-long, the rear wing support, because it's Y-shaped and it's a pylon, so Y-long. Manor Motorsport came up with that one. Here you see it from a slightly better angle, and you can see this new winglet that they've attached to the back of the car. 2-element winglet with an end plate. It's pretty clear here. There you go. You can see that central slit. You can see there, 2-element winglet. But you see what's wrong with this picture? I'll take the telestration off in a second. It's mounted backwards. So normally if you expect a downforce generating component to look like that, you'd expect this to be the front and the airflow to be coming at it this way and flowing up over it, generating downforce. But it's the other way round. So it's clear Ferrari have discovered some way of, or developed some way of bringing the airflow up from somewhere down here over the rear suspension elements, and this new aerodynamic element is clearly doing something beneficial to the rear end of the car. Ferrari are being a bit vague in their terminology about what it really does. I think it's really interesting. No team has actually developed this area of the car in this way so far. So it'll be interesting to see if any other teams use up some of their very scarce aerodynamic testing budget to develop their own versions of this, or is Ferrari going to have exclusivity on this concept for the rest of the season? Bit of a bold move. Again, Ferrari working hard on this year's car, clearly not putting everything into next year's car yet. Will they change that? Depends, I think, how the rest of the season goes on. Now, I was talking about some of the clever stuff happening underneath the floor. Well, here we can take a look underneath the floor. Just from the rear end, we don't normally get to look under the diffuser, but there's a few interesting details on this shot that I'd like to show you. You see these little numbers dotted around underneath the floor. These will relate to pressure tappings in the floor. There'll be little sensors in the floor that Ferrari will be using to see how the air is flowing under this new, significantly revised diffuser setup. And this car is, as I circled there, number 44. This is Lewis Hamilton's new floor. So you can see the shape of the overall diffuser on the outer element, but the real trick to it is all of this sculpting that's going on inside, under the floor, around the gearbox, all of this stuff that's quite hard to pick out in this picture. It looks like an angry cartoon I've just drawn there, doesn't it? But when you compare this floor layout to the old specification floor here in the Ferrari garage, you can see also Ferrari were doing a like-for-like comparison. There again are the same pressure tappings in the floor, but I think you can see a bit more sculpting on the floor around the gearbox and a few different shapes around the edge. A little bit hard to compare, especially when it's so dark and the team don't want us to take too close a look. Now, in free practice in Bahrain, it wasn't really conclusive. Free practice 1 was very, very hot compared to pre-season testing and compared to the competitive sessions we're going to see in qualifying and into the Grand Prix. So while the Ferraris didn't look particularly competitive, I don't think it's representative of what will happen as the weekend goes on. Also, with such a major aerodynamic change to the car, it may take 1, 2, 3 races before we really find out what's going on with this new aerodynamic package, because you change something as fundamental as that, it's going to change your setup window, it's going to change how your car performs, it's going to change how the tyres wear even, because the aero balance is going to be slightly different front to rear. So a lot more to come from Ferrari, but what Ferrari are probably truly hoping is that the view that this new floor is going to give every other team on the grid is this one, straight up the exhaust pipe as the Ferraris disappear off into the distance.
Oh no.
Yes!
Oh,
It's ridiculous. The thing goes off to the left.
oh, sorry.
Oh, yours.
We're getting there, we're getting there.
Oh, that's...
3, 2, 1.
Oh. Oh. Okay, they were...
We're close. To miss it.
Oh, we were bad. No.
No.
Oh no.
Come on, us.
Stay on the table. No, come on.
Yeah,
The aiming was good.
Joe!
Close.
Technical foul, you just adjusted the table.
French.
3, 2, 1.
Oh no, that was fine. I think it's distracting when you do two at the same time as well.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Too fast.
Oh no.
Yes!
Well
done, Charles. Thank you, Brian. I'm so competitive with this game. The one who loses needs to drink the whole glass. Do it every day.
I'm gonna do that. No.
Now we speak.
Oh god.
Oh, I love this.
No.
I'm dead. I'm gone.
No, come on. No, it's me. It's
Yeah, now you.
No way.
no.
No, I don't want to drink that much.
Oh,
That's crazy.
that's insane.
What's going on?
How?
What is this? Oh my god.
I don't think he realized.
Alright. What are you laughing? Did you move the table? I didn't even realize. I was so focused. The one who loses needs to drink the whole glass. Anyway, stay hydrated.
Ferrari's 2025 season hasn't hit expectations yet. They're heading into Imola with a huge load of anticipation, upgrades, and one chance to get things right at home. But this weekend's story is not confined to redemption. It greatly involves timing, strategy, and some changes expected to close the gap. So how is the Scuderia camp preparing for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix? Why this might be their last reset before things get serious. This week, Ferrari confirmed they'll bring a major update package to Imola. The SF-25 will feature a redesigned floor and revised side pods. They say these changes will help improve aerodynamic efficiency and stability in medium and high-speed corners. Reportedly, there will be tweaks to the cooling inlets and slight refinements to rear-end packaging. These upgrades are most likely intended to better suit Imola's technical layout. However, Ferrari hasn't officially detailed all components yet, but according to analysts, the team has now focused more on improving rear grip and cornering consistency. There's no confirmed statement from Ferrari about direct simulation feedback from Leclerc or Hamilton tied to these changes. Both Leclerc and Hamilton have reportedly backed the team's upgrade plans during recent debriefs. Ferrari hasn't started the season the way they hoped. The SF-25 looks quick at times, but it hasn't delivered consistently. They've been caught out by tyre issues, shaky strategy calls, and pit stop delays. Both Leclerc and Hamilton have made it clear the car feels off, especially in slow corners. Imola gives them a fair chance to see if the new suspension setup and other changes are actually helping. Now the question is, will these changes be sufficient to challenge Red Bull and McLaren? Charles Leclerc has been honest about the car's weaknesses. He says the car doesn't have the grip or balance needed to fight at the front on a regular basis. He's been clear that major upgrades are necessary if they want to tap into the car's real potential. Lewis Hamilton, still adjusting to life in a new team setup, has also raised similar concerns. He's pointed out problems with traction and rear-end stability. In reality, both of the issues have hurt his confidence in qualifying sessions and during races. However, despite the on-track struggles, the mood inside the team remains upbeat. At a recent Ferrari Family Games night, Leclerc, Hamilton, and Ferrari Driver Academy talents Maya Vogue and Aurelia Nobels were seen enjoying a round of playful challenges and team games. The evening spoke volumes about Team Red's strong spirit and growing camaraderie behind the scenes. Imola is old school. Here, the track is narrow, fast, and hard to pass on. The elevation changes and quick corners calls for precision. If you're not near the front in qualifying, you're in for a long afternoon. That's why Ferrari's recent updates have targeted better aero and a more stable rear. Both may help survive Imola's tough middle sector. That said, nobody at Ferrari expects a miracle this weekend. The bigger suspension update, the one they're really banking on, isn't ready yet. Still, behind the scenes, there's quiet confidence. Leclerc and Hamilton have both been involved in the direction of the updates. They've sat through the long debriefs, agreed on what's missing, and signed off on the changes. For now, everyone's pulling in the same direction, but that unity won't last forever if results don't follow soon. The Tifosi always show up with sky-high expectations when Ferrari races on home soil. But recent results have taken the edge off the excitement. Both drivers and team boss Fred Vasseur have agreed to focus on progress instead of promises. When asked how soon they'd know if the upgrades worked, Leclerc unhesitatingly stated, "We'll know within the first 10 laps of Friday." Ferrari has reportedly promised progress this weekend, and honestly that's somehow more realistic. But if the SF-25 updates click, and their strategy holds, a podium is quite possible. And if Hamilton finds tempo with the new rear end, maybe more surprises will show up. Overall, as of now, the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix looks like a mid-season referendum on upgrades, drivers and direction. Let's see if Ferrari gets it right, or if Imola just adds to the questions. Subscribe for our full post-qualifying breakdown Saturday. And tell us below, does this feel like a comeback or just damage control?